For this tutorial, we're going to be looking at sharpening an image. And so how to sharpen is really very important. One, our sensors are not sharp, so we need to add some sharpening for that fact. Two, we may want to sharpen just for monitor because maybe there's a slight motion blur to the camera even though you're holding it steady. Maybe the wind was blowing, you still had just there's slight camera movement, so it's not tack sharp. Or same for your person, any myriad of reasons. So we kind of like looking at sharp images anyway. For this particular one, um, it was taken at a 60th of a second at f10, so it's not as sharp as it could be. Plus the boat was moving, the wind was blowing that day, and that's why we have all the ripples in the water, as you can see here. So looks like I was moved slightly from here. And so in fact, why don't we stay zoomed into here? I'm going to be over here on the sharpening panel. So it's a detail panel. So under sharpen, we have an amount. And usually I'll raise it to no more than 70 typically, 60 to 70. So I just raised it to 64. Radius for an image like this, I probably won't, I tend not to go higher than like 1.2 unless the image just really needs it. Now right up here, there's a button that when it's in the down position, it turns off. And if you notice, look at the amount of sharpening taking place already. Turn it off, turn it on. So since I've done it a couple times, I can enable detail here, and here's off, here's on, there's off. So you can see it adds a lot just with that amount. But also notice that it increases the noise. I can see an increased noise in here when I have it. Coming down, so the amount is just that, the amount of sharpening. Radius is kind of like a white line being drawn along the edge. So what I'm doing is holding down the Option key and then clicking on the radius button. So you can see the little glow around the objects. And as I come left, the glow is less pronounced. So then you can probably see a graininess in there. So that's why I don't want to be way high like this, because then it'd be really noticed and just obnoxious. And I just want to add a little bit of sharpness back in to the image. And I want these a little high for you to be able to see anyway. So I'm going to come to detail. And what detail does is it defines the edges for us. So I'm holding the Option key down again. So as I slide it over, it's kind of similar to what we saw with radius. You can see kind of a halo, but that's the radius doing the halo. So it's defining the edges of objects. And it's also defining the noise and the texture in that tower, if you can see. Hopefully you can see that. So, but typically we want to define the edges in a what I call a high frequency image where it has a lot of edges like this one. So I'm going to stop there. Under masking, masking says wherever there's white like this, everything's going to be applied. As I slide to the right, it brings in black. The black is the mask. So wherever there's pure black, no sharpening will be applied. So the more I bring it over, the more it's affecting just the edges of our object, which is what we want. So now what we saw with the grain, it won't be affected because most of the grain is in the black areas of our mask. So working these sliders is very important in understanding what they do. And since this is a tutorial, you can go back and listen again. So now there it is. And there it is, and it does not have nearly as much grain, but it really sharpened up the edges as well. See how much, watch the edges all through here. Now it really is crisp. Let's back out, turn it off and on to see what it has. So there's, give it a second, there's none, and there's some. That's why see, I can hardly see any at all. That's why we always zoom in 1 to 1 on when we're applying sharpness. So there's none, and there's with it. It just really crispens up the water and the ripples and all the way through. So that's sharpening.